So, hello everyone and welcome to our technical writing panel. A huge thank you to all of our panelists for joining us for this session. All of our panelists have different backgrounds in the, I quote, technical writing field. So I'm really excited to hear everyone's answers. This is also very much a community driven session and panel. So please do put your questions in the session tab. There are two tabs. There's an event tab chat and a session chat tab. Please put it in the session one. If it goes in the event one, it will stay there until this whole event ends tomorrow. So in the session one, and I will keep an eye on that during this panel and make sure your questions are answered. So to start, I would like to hear from our panelists just a bit of background of who you are, what you do, and also where you are, because I know we're all dialing in from different places. So who you are, what you do, and where you are based. So should we start with you, Venkat?
Greetings, thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone who joined. My name is Venkat Subramaniam. I am connecting from near Denver, Colorado, where we are supposed to get a blizzard as we speak. I would probably define myself as a compulsive writer. I have written about 11 books so far, mostly for pragmatic programmers. I've thoroughly enjoyed the learning process, and I'm here to share some of those on the panel. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Rachel?
Sure. I'm an American wolf girl in London, apparently, and I work at Facebook, where I am I'm the head of the React family documentation. Last year, I was talking a bit about our work on React Native, and now I'll get to talk to you a bit about what we've been doing with React.js, teaching millions of developers around the world. I have written one technical book about animated user interfaces, but before this, I used to be an award-winning cartoonist and web developer, of course.
Thank you so much. Adobe?
My name is Adobe Tolton, and I have been working in publishing for over 23 years, and 20 of that was spent working on computer technology books. I've been working with Pragmatic for about 4 years now this January. And, I just really enjoy all the work I do working with authors and just helping them to be able to organize their thoughts and put it out in book form. So I've been freelancing for about 14 years. More like 7 years now. So for about 7 years. So and I just really, like I said, enjoy working with authors.
Much. Dave?
Hey everybody, I am Dave Rankin. I'm coming to you from Providence, Rhode Island, and I am currently the CEO and publisher of the Pragmatic Programmers. So I'll kind of be talking about the publishing end and business end of things. Before that, I was a software developer for 20 years, and there are different times I did editorial work, writing work. So it's kind of my background is both writing and software development, and now certainly really the business end of how do you publish technical material.
Cool, thank you so much. So
I also forgot to mention that I'm in sunny Bronx, New York.
Nice. I love where everyone's from. Like, we've got such a variation. It's great. Can anyone tell me what they're working on at the moment, or is it a secret? Anything writing related that they're working on at the moment?
I don't think it's a secret, Dave. It's okay.
Feel free to talk about it.
I have a few books that I'm working on now. One is, two Python books, one Emacs list book. I've got, let's see, there's another one. Another Python book, actually, by the same author. And I've got some OOP books, one OOP book. So, and then I have other clients too that I'm working with books on. So there's a whole gamut of projects that I've got at the moment.
Cool. Someone else?
working on rewriting the react.js.org documentation. It's a lot of fun. It's a really big project because we're not just updating the docs online, we're basically writing the book on React. The core team wants to teach people how to think in React. There's plenty of people teaching how to build X, Y, and Z in React, but understanding the functional programming underpinnings of React and how to best build with it and think about state, etc. These are things that core team hasn't felt have been taught as well as they'd like to. So I get to help them realize that dream. The curriculum's been designed by Dan Abramov, who is very popular in the React community as a core maintainer. And it's really exciting. I learned a lot working on React Native about how to bring the community into editing and writing the docs and having community deputy editors. And I'm looking forward to, as this journey continues, engaging the community even more as we build these learning resources for everyone to use.
Well, I don't work directly on individual books anymore, but I can tell you some of the non-secret stuff, because there are a few secrets, right, that we're working toward at the Pragmatic Programmers. And so I guess one of the bigger public things that we've been talking about lately is that earlier this year we had a partnership with Medium, and so you can now find Pragmatic Programmer content on a new Medium publication. And we're only the third tech publication that Medium has. We're really going to be expanding into this area of kind of more short format stuff, tutorial-oriented type of content. And some of it will be in support of existing books, and some of it will be totally brand new content. And we have, the part that I can't talk about is some extremely interesting partnerships to do content across a range of stuff that we're not necessarily as deep in. But expect to see a lot of stuff around kind of machine learning from us coming out in the relatively near future. And definitely more, Rust everything, because our readers have been demanding Rust everything. And kind of game development stuff, which are areas that we typically weren't so strong in before, but we're going to have some really good stuff coming out along those lines. And other than that, it's kind of all the books that you normally see, the things that you see us coming. I think those are probably the most interesting things that I can talk about, like at the business level of stuff. So,
Pat, you're muted.
I'm mostly working with clients on software projects, consulting, training, mentoring. On the writing front, I recently finished a book on Kotlin DSLs. And so taking a break from writing technical book at this point, but we'll see what comes up in the next few months.
Exciting. Okay, we've got some questions coming in, which is good. Our first one, how do you find or create opportunities to write books? And then in brackets, not self-published.
Don't take no for an answer. No, true story. My little book on UI animation, I had pitched it to my dream publisher, but they weren't sure that it was really a topic. And so they were like, thanks for, thanks for your submission, happy to discuss with you. And I was like, absolutely, I want to discuss your feelings on this. And, I went, I had a one-on-one with a publisher's editor who had reviewed the submission, and I listened to their concerns with the submission. And in the conversation, I was able to address the concerns. It wasn't a hard pitch or anything. It was just that we needed more communication around what I was pitching. And it was very informative for me. We ended up turning that no into a yes. And I published a little book with them. It's quite lovely. So I guess what I mean by this is, do feel free to approach and submit your idea to publishers. They may reject you, but rather than feeling like, I failed, ergo I'm a failure, it's an excellent opportunity to say, well, that's fascinating. Tell me more about what you were looking for so I can do better next time. And you might just turn that no into a yes.
For me, I would say one of the things that helps a lot is networking. Hanging around with friends who are published authors is probably the easiest way to follow what they do. And that's exactly what I did for myself. Is I was, among people who were writing books, and I wanted to write a book, and so turned around and said, "Hey, what should I do if I want to publish it? Oh, let me put you in touch." And that's exactly how I really came into touch with potential publishers who were interested in publishing my very first few books. And then, of course, after you publish a little bit, you got reputation and some history of what you're writing books, and then things become much easier after that. But at least in the beginning, I think it helps to have networking to help you guide along.
Something else I would say, I did acquisitions for a long time at the Pragmatic Programmer, so you're kind of at that point on the forefront of working with authors who, like Rachel said, they're pitching an idea to you. And I think that different publishers handle it a little bit differently. Larger ones probably do this less, but certainly ones our size and a whole bunch of our immediate competitors are very happy to give you a lot of feedback. If you, like Rachel said, if you submit a proposal about a book, it's usually in our best interest as a publisher to spend a bit of time with you to go, okay, this is interesting. Could we shape it a bit like this? And the feedback we're giving you is based on kind of insights we have about the market. What are competing books on the topic? How does that topic sell? What's an interesting angle on it? What are we seeing in you individually as an author? And usually I know that we certainly are, and I know, again, a lot of our competitors are very happy to share that kind of information, because it means that together we're going to create, a much more successful book, successful being one that reaches a broad audience, teaches the concepts, all that kind of thing. So definitely, I agree 100%. Don't, and even if an author is a no, or a publisher is a no right away, and that is the end of the story with them, try other publishers. I mean, we tell that to people all the time. We say, look, this is a fantastic idea. You seem like the right person to write the book. It's just not the right material for us, because every publisher kind of specializes in some area. They have a unique voice and take on things. And we see proposals all the time, and we think, yeah, that's a great book. It's just we don't have the audience. We don't have the capacity to do that book justice. And I'm happy to say our acquisitions people will often point you to, on the side, they'll be like, go try this publisher, go try that publisher, because we roughly know who's going to be a good fit for it. So definitely don't give up. And the other thing that we always tell people is sometimes, someone pitches us an idea and we say, sorry, it's not a good fit. And then instead of saying, well, what can I do around this idea? They'll say, well, you tell me, what do you want me to write? And I don't think most publishers do that. We certainly don't, because we need the author to have a certain, writing a book is very difficult. You need to come into it with a certain amount of passion. You need to be highly interested in the topic. And if we just go, oh, what sells well? Give us, React, this, that, the other thing, and they've never done it, and they're going to go out and try to do it. It's going to be like, it's not going to produce a great book, and it's unlikely they'll be able to make it through the long, hard slog. You need to be passionate about it. So that would be the other thing I would say is think about the problems you're solving, the things you're working on, the stuff you care about. That's probably a good starting point for what can you write a book about.
You've just agreed to basically get an influx of emails tomorrow with book ideas from our community. Sorry, Rachel, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that the publishing industry is not unlike the comics publishing industry back in the day. And usually the people you're pitching to, they're swarmed with people who can write and draw and do all those things. What they want is your idea. And pitching a fully formed idea, like with an outline, putting your submissions packet together is a great idea. And I think probably these people can talk more to that than I can, but having an outline, a sample chapter, showing that you've really been thinking about these ideas will go a long way to showing the publisher that you're serious, you mean business, but also, put a little note on the end there, like, I'm flexible if this doesn't fit with your format. I'm not like, this is my baby. If it's your baby, you should be self-publishing. If you want to become a better writer and work with an editor that really takes your lump of unshaped diamond and turns it into a glittering 24-karat centerpiece, then working with an editorial team and a publisher is for you. But I was just thinking about how much editors in my history have appreciated putting together a packet. And when I did, and this did happen on rare occasions, get approached by publishers who were like, hey, you want to write a book? I don't know, what are you good at? Those always didn't, well, there's a reason I only published one book, and it was the one that I pitched, but they didn't go anywhere. And I don't think that they would have been a great use of my time. It was more of a collaborative experience, I think. definitely think about the publishers that you're reading most of the time. I got Pragmatic books all over my bookshelf, and look at like who are you reading? Those are probably the people you want to reach out to and pitch to, and then maybe they'll help you write as well as your favorite authors.
Yeah. Anything else before we move on to the next question?
I'll probably add, I couldn't agree more with what Rochelle said, but maybe not go to the extreme that I have normally gone to, and Dave will attest to this. Almost all the books I've written, actually, I've completed my first draft before I approach the publisher, which is a bit extreme, but I do that mainly because, I want to make sure that I have time to really write the book, and the only way you have time to write a book is to actually write it. It also takes away so much pressure from when are you going to get the book done? Well, it's done. So let's get going. So let's start editing it and moving it forward. So almost all the books, especially the very first few, I actually, but also goes to another extreme. It's kind of a weird experience. How I started writing the book is I thought of an idea and I felt so compelled about this idea. I quit everything else and just started writing the book. And within a matter of 2 weeks, I finished the first draft. And then I'm like, gosh, I have a book with me right now. I need to find a publisher. And that really changes the dialogue a lot when you have written a book and then you're trying to find a publisher, then trying to say, hey, I would like to write a book. Anybody interested? So, you can take it to the extreme depending on how much time and effort you can put into it.
Cool. Anything else to add before we move on? Cool. Okay. Our next question, how did you first get started with technical writing? Adobe, do you want to start us off?
Well, I'm not a writer specifically, but as an editor, I will work with the authors to help them, like I said, just get their words together and organize. So when I started doing this, it was shortly after I finished college, actually, and I was working for a cell biology journal, and I wanted to get closer to working with the authors, because at the journal there wasn't any opportunity to really edit the text. It was pretty much just shuffling papers along to peer review. So when I got my first job working for a larger publisher, they told me that the opening was in computer technology books. So I wasn't exactly sure what that meant, because I had in my mind that it was more consumer based. So things like Windows and learning how to use your desktop. But when they handed me my first project, which was OSS Essentials. So I was like, I don't know what that is. I guess I'm going to find out really quickly. And ever since then, it wasn't so much the technology that kept me there. It was the authors that I worked with, because they were all, like David mentioned earlier, the passion. And the authors were so passionate about their work. They really believed in what they were doing. And if that passion is there, then I'm all in. And I'll work with you all the way through, from conception to final publication, and celebrate that goal. So and like I said, this is about 20 years ago. So that was my start, and I've been in it for this long, and I don't see myself leaving this, because like I said, it's the passion of the authors that really keeps me going.
I'll share my story. I wanted to, like I mentioned earlier, I was among authors, and I went to a really good friend somebody I respect a lot, who has written really good, very well-known books in the industry. And I asked him, hey, I'm trying to think of writing a book. What do you think? And he said, how's your business? I said, my business is doing great. I'm, totally busy. He said, then don't bother writing a book, because book is a business size, big size business card. If you're doing really well, why do you want to spend your time on it? I'm like, that's a great advice. Thanks. I won't write a book. So I dropped the idea of writing a book, and maybe about 6 months went by. And I totally agree with my friend. He's right, but that's not the only reason to write a book. And I realized eventually the real reason I want to write a book is I have a story to tell. And I really, want to have a compelling story to tell. And of course, story as in, a technical journey I've gone through, learned something. So I used to speak in user groups, and I still do. And I sent out an abstract to speak in the local user group, happened to be a .NET user group. And I said, hey, I want to talk about this particular topic. Are you interested? And they said, whoa, that's an interesting topic. Never heard anybody speak about it. Sure, send us your abstract. And I sent an abstract, and within 5 minutes, I realized, wait a minute, if nobody has talked about it, wouldn't that be a really good book to write? And I immediately did a quick Google search and never came across a book on the topic. And that was it. Next 5 minutes later, I was writing a book on it. And that's basically how I started with the first book. Is it came out of a talk I was going to give at the local user group. And then, of course, everything else is history after that.
I can go. How to get started? Well, that is a great question. I actually did not intend to get started in technical writing. I had been giving talks about CSS animations and transitions, and sometimes the online, Smashing Mag, Listapark, those sorts of publications online, they'd be like, hey, you want to write an article? And it doesn't pay very much, but when you're making all these talks and demos, you've got plenty of material and plenty of opinions to share. So I started by writing some of those, and then I needed money, and there was an ability to get paid to write for MDN. I believe some of the best materials from MDN have come out of relationships like this with like Ruth Johnson and Rachel Andrew, who are contemporaries who contributed a lot from like the Web Audio API to CSS grids. And MDN had just such a high quality editorial team, and you could get paid to write. And I got to tell you, I think that working with MDN helped me end up in this role, where I mean, yeah, the book helped, but for a technical writing role or a documentation engineering role on a team at a company, as opposed to a publisher's role or just publishing a book, they like to see that you have contributed to some sort of documentation that's out there. And documentation might sound like, what's the difference between documentation and like articles and books? Well, that really depends on who you're writing for and what you're writing. For instance, articles on web publications go really well with tutorials and demo content. So if you're making a bunch of talks and you got demos, sometimes just transferring your talk into an online article with examples is a really good place to start. But maybe you're more of a long form person. Maybe you start by just documenting the APIs of something you really want to learn, and then that turns into a small handbook that you want to publish. Like the Rust book is literally their documentation, but you can print it out and keep it as a book. The line has begun to blur, so it's up to you whether and where you want to write and for which audience. For me, I specifically took this role of, official in-house docs person because I wanted to learn React. But I didn't want to learn React through an online course, because every time I talked to the React core team, they'd be like, that's not quite right. I wanted to learn it from the engineers who build it, because they have amazing backgrounds. I learned when I worked at Microsoft for a little bit that I love working with engineers. I love understanding things the way they know them, but I don't have a computer science degree. Oh man, where am I going to get that hands-on one-on-one time with these shiny engineers where it's their job to tell me everything they know, and it's my job to teach everyone? So sometimes, if you're a lifelong learner, it can really align. But I think it's good to just start writing somewhere. If you have content like a talk, and you realize, you know what, this would be an amazing article, or this would be an amazing book. If you're ambitious, go for it. The thing is that you just start typing.
That really links to another question we've had, which is, what are your thoughts on writing a technical piece on a topic that you don't know technically that well, but the technology excites you and really interests you? What are your thoughts on that?
I think I just gave them. Find a way that you can get paid to learn them and to teach them. And that's the ideal, right? Like you get paid to learn something you don't know, right? That's amazing. That's like free college. And I'm all a huge fan of that. Back when I used to mentor people giving talks, I used to say like there are three great, you know, like you keep asking me, what talk idea should I get? Where will I get it from? It's like you can write about the talk. You can give the talk that no one else is giving that you want to see. You can improve on a talk you see being mangled over and over again, and you can give a talk on the thing that you want to learn. And that's kind of, those are three great approaches to writing. The thing that you want to learn, challenging yourself to write like an introduction to this topic, just learning enough to be able to be like, hey, I hear there are lots of new people. I'm learning this for the first time. I come from X background. Perhaps my experiences will relate to you. I don't know. Maybe you're a line chef and you see how React's component infrastructure kind of looks like a kitchen model. Not that I've used that metaphor before, but I think writing is an excellent challenge. And you won't believe how much the people who work on the core infrastructure of these things, like the key contributors, people who are trainers, etc., most of them would love to be interviewed to contribute to your article if you like quote and link to them, or they really want you to know exactly how this implementation detail works. And so being able to come in and be like, I am writing about this thing, could you teach me? So many people would just light up and be happy to assist you in dispersing their knowledge.
I would say, you know, if I know absolutely nothing about a topic, I definitely would not venture into writing about it. It's the first step would be to really take the time to learn it. And like I mentioned, for myself, I often look for, you know, do I have a story to tell? But having said that, I don't think I've ever written a book where I go in to start writing the book and then realize I really don't know a whole lot about this as I thought I did. That's one of the beautiful things about writing a book is we really get to learn more in the process of writing. So you come in with something you know, and it's a perception of how much you think you know. But when you finish the process, you actually look back and say, oh my gosh, that was a big journey. I didn't realize how much I did not know in actually this particular topic. And that's a really nice, exciting opportunity for, you know, a lot of times if you ask me, why do I want to write a book? Well, part of the reason really honestly is I want to learn more about the topic. That's exactly the reason to even give a talk, whether you're writing a talk or writing a blog post or writing a book. You really want to be invested in learning more into a topic. But I would say it's an incremental process. You come in with a little and you leave with a lot more. And that's kind of the exciting journey in there.
I have a story of one of my most successful. This isn't a book. I'm not an author and I've never written a book, but one of my successful blog posts was a very, very basic intro to Webpack. And I actually wrote it because I realized this was a couple of years ago that I've been working at a company for 8 months and I still had no idea what the Webpack config did. And I finished the contract because I was freelancing and I was like, well, I'm just going to write this really basic blog post of like, what does a Webpack config look like? So if you ever see one, you'll see there's an input, there's an output. And I've been working with this project and I didn't know. And from that, I got a message from someone on the Webpack team saying, thank you so much. You wrote it really simply. Would you consider becoming like a developer, like advocate for us? And I didn't. I then got offered another contract and went to that. But actually, I didn't know basically I didn't know what I was writing, but I knew I had a frustration with this thing and I knew I wanted to understand it more. So I just wrote a very basic blog post of like, what does this Webpack config do? And then, yeah, it's now weirdly still being, according to Medium stats, the most successful blog post I've written.
You know, related to that, I shouldn't name the author probably without permission, but one of our books is one of our most popular books. If you Google around, you might find the author talking about it. He talks about how he hate wrote it, and it's that he was forced to work with the technology at work. He hated it so much, thought the documentation was so terrible, that he's like, you know what, I am going to write this thing. He said, and you know, he's written many books for us, and he's like, all my other books were a work of love. That was a work of hate. I hated that technology and how little information there was about it, that I just wrote the book. So I think you can come to it from that angle too.
I didn't hate it. The documentation at the time for Webpack, and actually I think they've a million times better now, but in 2016 it wasn't that good, and so mine wasn't a hate post. It was a hopefully this will also help someone else, and because it also helped me writing it.
Sounds a lot like giving the talk you wish you'd see.
Yes, yeah.
Awesome.
We have more questions coming in. One for you, Rachel. I really like the docs and tutorials on React.org. I think you are doing something right when, as a technologist, I can recommend engineers just the original tutorials and docs of a framework to learn it. Was that the goal with the React site?
It is certainly our goal now. The site, as you see today, until August, which is when we are, fingers crossed, putting up the beta. But the site today organically grew over, like, has it been like 2013? It's been a long time. It's been a long time. So it grew organically. And in some ways, there are things that could be better. For instance, the documentation right now uses an older form of components that uses classes. Now we use functions. You see that? And we notice that people externally do a better job of teaching function components than we do. So we have to get our acting gear. We are inspired by the excellent learning materials that other people have put out, that we want to create a place where people can go and just learn React, just learn how to think in React. A resource that people can link to when they're onboarding new people, where this happened with me in 3JS way back in the day. You have a meetup to learn it, and it's really like just a group of people visiting the official documentation site and just working through some tutorials. Like, that's a success scenario. That's what you want to see. You get your translation community on that, and then before you know it, everybody around the world is able to just deep link into the various docs. Like, oh, you got stuck on that? Oh, you got this error message? Oh, you're still using classes? Well, here you go. And yeah, I'm so happy that the docs have served you well this far. We want to make sure that they're serving you well for the duration of your career with React. But yes, very much it's a sign of success when people are using the docs, not just at work, but they're using them in their local communities. They're using them with their kids, with their mentees. When you're just seeing like the whole quote unquote engineering family piling in there.
Nice. And then we've had another question. Are physical books still in demand for the tech community? And that's open to anyone.
Huge, bigger and bigger. The book. I mean, the honest answer, and I'm definitely on record saying this other places, is for sure, without a doubt, the industry is very different now than it was 20 years ago. You know, 20 years ago, a tech book, like a physical, actual book, was a very different thing. It was much more in demand in a lot of ways. And a large part of that is because you didn't have the options, right? So there weren't as many places that you could go, you know, what would you do back then? Maybe you'd go on like Usenet or something. You'd go different places, but nowadays you have video learning. You have a billion free sources for all kinds of, you know, free, everything from short tutorials to longer pieces. You have people self-publishing, giving that away for free. You have all the kind of the virtual platforms, you know, the things like Educative and stuff, where it's like these mixed media types of learning strategies. O'Reilly has their own now too. You know, so now there's just so many more ways to learn any of this kind of information. So whether you're talking about something like getting straight up documentation for a project where you can go online and get that, or like Rachel said, you got, you know, something like the Rust book that you get a physical copy of, or you're talking about learning a greater concept, you know, just across the board. I want to learn all about, you know, any sort of bigger idea. There's just so many places to go. So yes, there is more competition in terms of where people are going to go for getting that type of information. And it's why, you know, again, it's no secret that we as a publisher and pretty much all the other publishers have been slowly exploring other ways. You know, O'Reilly went very, very heavy into video. We've been developing partnerships over the last year to be able to reach people who like to learn in different ways. And I think that's really the future of the publishing about technical information is going to be more of that type of thing. It's going to be publishers who aren't just doing a single format anymore. It's going to be, you know, you come work with us and we will help you get your content into various formats, and we're going to help you reach the greatest audience, you know, the greatest number of readers that way. So there's definitely still a market. Ebooks, don't forget, ebooks are huge. They had their best year ever last year globally. It was huge in terms of the pandemic. That was one very, you know, one thing that came out of it was as people weren't going to physical bookstores, they went crazy for ebooks. So that's something the publishing industry was looking at. But yeah, it's not the same as it was 20 years ago. I don't think they're going entirely away. I just think they're going to be supplemented with lots of other types of resources for learning.
I just saw Rachel walk away and then come back holding a pile of books.
Well, I was just going to say, I know, like, I try to buy everything as an ebook whenever I can, simply because the darn books are so big and heavy and they're huge. Problem is, though, I tend to like have a lot of ebooks I haven't finished. The physical copy is like this big, heavy, read me kind of anchor. And you can also like put them on your desk, so when people walk by, they can be all like, oh, is that a copy of Algorithms Design Manual? I studied that in college. You'd be like, uh-huh, my favorite chapter is this one right here. No, I'm just kidding. Or you could be like, oh, let me, you're new, let me buy you this clue. That happens too. I love books because it's kind of like they've become the new like punk pin that you keep in the office, like on your lapel. You just keep it at your desk. It's like, talk to me about these subjects, people. But seriously, for my birthday, I got this algorithms textbook that I've been wanting for a long time. Yeah, it's big and it's heavy, but you know, it holds itself open when you need some nice bedtime reading. And this book on it's basically just functional programming all the way down. And my particular favorite, which you might recognize from Pragmatic Programmers, Mises, yay! And I'm sure I could probably read this as a website, but you know, another thing, e-readers haven't quite done illustrations very well yet. As a person who draws a lot of illustrations, I love this. Just because if you want to see a really good visual thing, e-readers tend to be really small, they tend to be really compact, so it's that or your iPad. And the iPad, light pollution, it just keeps you up. When we get really nice displays for illustrations that don't keep you up all night, then I think I'll stop buying these ridiculously oversized books. But until then, they do a great job as laptop stands and conversation starters when I'm not reading them.
Well, completely on a tangent, just a story to share. I had a friend go for an interview in a company, and the interviewer was asking questions, and he's like, "Oh, you got that book on your shelf?" And the person is like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I reviewed that book." And immediately the person opens the book, and sure, there's acknowledgement with the name and the review. And it's like, well, you're hired. So, you know, that shows that you're actually deeply invested in the technology. And so that's another purpose of a physical book, I guess, is you can identify what you have read and what you contributed to in some way.
Any other comments on that before we move on?
I was also going to say, if you are publishing a physical book, you can actually bring the little book with you and hand it to people when you are meeting them for the first time. Like, oh, are you into this topic? I had an extra copy. I thought you might like it. I'm not bragging at all. I just want you to remember me and give you a gift. But, you know, you have to be careful how you deploy that in different cultures.
And they do make great gifts, you know, books do, you know, they do make great gifts. Right, next question. Can writing tech documentation for a project you're working on be a gateway to writing a bona fide book, or is it a very different skill? Adobe, you've unmuted.
That part, maybe. It depends. Is writing a book, there's a different mindset in a way that you have to have. Because I know with Pragmatic books specifically, we are asking our authors to write a hero's journey. Just bring your readers along with you to show them how something is done, explain why it's done this way, and just encapsulate it all in a story. And you have to think about it in that way, as a narrative, as this thing that you want readers to know, and you want them to be able to feel. Again, going back to that passion, you want them to feel that as well. And documentation, as helpful as it may be, doesn't necessarily carry that. So it does take some practice, I think, to be able to make that switch from writing documentation to writing a technology book.
I'm going to agree with you there. Well, I do think that if you can write documentation, you can be like, you obviously you know your material now, and you've been practicing writing. So the next step is to figure out how to write really amazing essays, and to write pieces and run them past your friends, or maybe start leaning into writing articles and seeing what's working with the audience, what isn't. Maybe join up with a couple of other people with similar aspirations and kind of, ping pong off each other's work, giving each other feedback. Like, I think that I say this also because I work with a bunch of tech writers who would not write very compelling books at their current state of writing. They're good at communicating information, but they're not good at grabbing a reader and just really conveying information and pulling them along into the narrative. You do need to know a little bit about how narratives work to write a long book on prose. That said, Dan Abramov, who I work with, he does a lot of technical writing. I think most of the React core team does technical writing at some point or another, whether it's a release post for a blog or outlining how an API would work on GitHub. Dan, he's got this Just JavaScript course that he's been writing with all of the people who have followed him since forever in the React world. And he's pretty good at explaining things to them just from this back and forth with his audience and practicing. So I think you can go from writing technical documentation that's very bare bones and lean, and you can get on that path if you want to. Would you just, dump API docs onto paper? No. Your job is to explain how the API works. Otherwise, we'd just be auto-generating everything, and there'd be no job for you. So I think there's a path there, but you have to be aware that just technical knowledge isn't enough. You have to invest in learning in storytelling. In Scotland, there's an entire storytelling community and guild that's founded around, conveying people's stories. If you're curious about going from technical writing to authorship, that's a good place to start.
Cool. I'm going to move on because we've got quite a few more questions. So what I'm going to do for the next couple of questions is I'll have one or two people answer it, and then we'll move on, and hopefully we can get through the next couple because we've only got like 10 minutes left. So any tips or suggestions for a DevOps apprentice on technical writing documents for a field that's quite new, like DevOps? Silence.
I mean, I can say
there's no answer.
I can say that I can say this, that from the it is one of the
Dave, I think you're muted.
Am I?
No, we can hear you.
Okay.
That is one of the topics that we get a lot of proposals on, that is tricky in book format for exactly the reasons that it's any of these fields, any of these areas that are so new, changing so quickly, it's very, very difficult to do a book that you're going to, by the time that you have it done and published a couple months later, is it already out of date? So it's my advice would be if you're thinking book anyway, don't hesitate to propose it, but there is a good chance that any publisher is going to try to steer you in a different direction to something that's a little quicker to update. I know that's certainly the type of thing we do. Like we have other types of formats, or we have some very short, these little 50-page books, and we would steer you in that direction. Something that's like, we know that you can get it out quickly, and you would be agreeing up front that like you're going to be with there, every couple months, hitting some updates, doing some stuff, because it is tough with topics like that, at least from the book perspective.
Yeah. Our next question. The main reason I haven't started writing is due to I don't know as much on this topic as other people. Any tips for how best to deal with imposter syndrome?
I'll say that I've never known on any topic as much as anybody else did. And that's going to be the case all the time. It's very often that I go speak in a conference where literally the author of the language or the framework is sitting right in front of me in the audience, and I'm trying to give a talk on the topic. And it's like, yeah, I have to do it because I've got a story to tell. I've got something I've learned. And so what you're really putting in a book or a conference talk is your story, your journey, your understanding. And your focus is not on what you know, but the focus is on what others can learn from your experience. So I think that's the key. Is it's not about the author, it's about the audience. And as long as we can focus on the audience, I think we come out winning.
That's really well put.
I just want to add that. Sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to say that I think one of the things that people should remember is that writing doesn't have to be a lonely process. You've got a team of people around you, so you can lean on other people to get information if there's something you're not quite sure of. And if that person doesn't know something, then they may know somebody who knows something. So, you just lean on that network and just remember that you don't have to know everything, and they're not expecting you to be the complete expert. And just remember that you're not, you don't have to be alone in writing your books. We've got, even when we have our authors working on their books, we send these out to tech reviewers because you want to check and just see if there's something else that could be added or taken out. But we're not expecting that the authors themselves are going to know everything that they're writing.
And this is true even in the professional tech writing business as well. Very few people who work as tech writers on the big teams, the open source teams as well at Facebook, are experts. It's their job to get information from the experts. And I should point out that as much as we admire the amazing engineers that lead these efforts and know so much more than we could ever hope to fit in our heads in one lifetime, seriously, you can never fit that amount of knowledge in your head in one lifetime, collectively. But they don't, I face this question a lot. I'm surrounded by them, but you're the one writing. Like, you're the one who wants to bring this idea to fruition, to make it a story that other people can understand and hear. People like you, the different audiences, and lots of people who are the experts, who have that technical depth. They don't have the skill to tell that story, and so it just stays with them. And if it stays with them, it dies with them too. You're an essential part of the dispersal of knowledge, and you don't have to be the expert to do that. You just have to be the expert at sharing those ideas. That's good enough.
You're muted, Kimberly.
Oh, I'm the one muted, thank you. I always try to mute when I take a sip of water because I don't want anyone to hear like a big glug. How unique do you think a book concept needs to be in order to attract a publisher's attention, or is there always room for one more? We see a lot of Twitter famous tech people writing books that join already crowded spaces. Is this worth it versus trying a more unique approach? Dave, maybe?
I guess that's maybe for me. Yeah, yes, certainly publishers are going to look at any proposal and look at what's the competition like for that particular topic. But it's not necessarily about the topic, it's about the angle you bring. You know, how many books are there about Python, and yet consistently every few months some new Python book comes out and it does extraordinarily well. It finds a very large audience. And so it's a matter of like finding new and interesting angles. This is, you know, barring, of course, some major change in a language or technology. Rachel has most of the Python books I see. You know, so if there's some new, you know, a new version of a language, some incredibly new feature or something, some big change comes, then that's a little bit different. But otherwise, it's about trying to find a unique angle. And so that's often what we say to authors is when they're proposing something, it's, you know, we're not going to say no because there's a million things already written on that subject. But if there's already a million that take the exact same angle, the exact same everything, then we kind of go, well, how is this contributing something new to the conversation? So that's what we encourage authors to do, is go out, take a look and see what's already written on the topic. Don't avoid it just because there's already stuff on that topic, but try to go, well, what can I add to this conversation about the topic that isn't already there? That's your unique angle, and that will certainly still, you know, get any publisher's attention.
Sounds very similar to like talks, you know, like there are many talks on, you know, any topic, and as long as you give your angle to it, that's what will make it unique. And it sounds, you know, very similar with books. Right, we've got 3 minutes left, and I'm going to end with this question, which is, any tips for someone writing the first draft of their book?
Just do it.
I definitely agree with that. Just write it. Don't worry about trying to make it perfect. Just do a complete brain dump and figure it all out afterwards.
I'll add to that. You know, different people have different styles of writing. I have some friends who would sit there and write a paragraph 20 times before they move on to the next one. On the other hand, I'm quite the opposite. I'll do a core dump and write anything that comes to my mind, fill up, you know, hundreds of pages, and then come back and start reworking. And there is really no right way at all. And like, you know, you said, there is always time to come back and make it better, improve it. So, you know, write it and then come back and revise it.
I think we're probably, we would all have the same answer coming kind of from the book world, because it's always going to be that you're paring down, revising, editing. So my first thought too was also just write. It's just, because that really is the hardest part when you're going to do something that's really long format, is just getting going and then working on, you know, you're going to have plenty of time to polish, revise, edit, pare down. So yeah, as cliche as it's becoming now, it really is just about writing and just getting started for that length of stuff.
Well, I got two things to say to that. Number one, expect that your draft that you wrote, it's going to take you as long to edit it as it took to write it, and as long to promote it as it took to write it. So you're actually only 1/3 of the way there once you finish your draft. You ain't done. You're far from it. But from the professional making educational materials world, start with your outline. Figure out what it is you're trying to say. Like, break it down into OKRs. What are you trying to teach people? How will you know you've taught it to them? And try to add some structure to your writing. It's a lot easier, at least for some people like myself, to fill out chapters on topics than it is to just starting writing completely linearly. So get that bird's eye view, break down your topics into like an outline, like what would your table of contents look like? If this were a site, what would the side nav bar look like? And that can be a really great way for you to make sure you haven't left anything off the table, and it can help you see what kind of a book you want to write just by that process alone.
And, you know, as a very practical kind of hands-on thing, you could go to pretty much any publisher. You could certainly go to us, you can go to any of our competitors, and we all have like templates for proposals that we're looking for. And so you're going to see, like, we're going to say, give us an outline that includes these things. Tell us a little bit about them. Like, we're going to tell you basically all the stuff we're going to be looking for. So if you just kind of have these ideas starting to formulate, that is a structure you can immediately start putting your ideas on. So that could also be a good starting point.
Cool. Well, Adobe.
I was going to say one of the things that we usually recommend to authors is whenever they've already put together their outline, don't go writing the first chapter. Just find the piece that you know the most about, and you know that you can really get your ideas through, and write that, because you'll feel a sense of accomplishment because you've completed that piece, or it just seems easier for you. And then go back to write all the other pieces, because now you've kind of built that little bit of confidence in yourself that you know that you can go back and start working on those other pieces.
Oh, I like that tip. Huge thank you to everyone on the panel. I know there are 1 or 2 questions we didn't get to answer, so I'm really, really sorry about that. Codebar does have a blog, so if you've got an idea for a technical blog post and you think you don't know enough, I'm going to tell you it's false, and drop me an email and I can have a chat with you and flesh out your idea if you want, or I will just shout at you and tell you to keep writing. But yeah, do use the Codebar community, and even our Slack. If you've got ideas, drop them in there. If you have a book idea, I won't give you Dave's email, but I'm pretty sure, I could maybe give Dave the idea, or I don't know. But yeah, drop us an email, and hugely thank you to all of our panelists. The next session, we are 2 minutes into the next session, so I'm really sorry for overlapping. The next session is Tom doing Staying in One Place Doesn't Mean Standing Still. So huge thank you, panelists. Huge thank you for your questions, and enjoy the last 2 sessions of our career day. See you later. Thank you. I'll hang around and wait for everyone to go.
Can people still hear us?
Yeah, people. There's 19 people still watching.
I better not reveal any industry secrets.
Any deep Facebook secrets that we're not meant to know?
I was actually really surprised people wanted to know so much about publishing. Like, I get everyone wants to write a book, because definitely when I got started in my career, it was like, make yourself an expert at something, write book about thing, then be consultant on thing. I chose like the one thing that you cannot do that very well with, which is animation, web animation specifically. And I look back and I'm just like, oh my God. But it's like, just JavaScript. Like, gosh, Rachel, just JavaScript. Put down creative coding. Stop that. Why do you keep doing that? I can't stop her from doing that. But I'm also curious, like, didn't hear a lot of folks being like, is technical writing a good way to get in with my favorite open source technology? Because the truth is, like, yeah, pretty much every open source repo out there has terrible authorship, and the most successful ones, they're investing in like teams of open source deputy editors. Look at Vue's documentation. Yeah. They've got an open source team that works on that. It's organized. Yeah. Is Vue the best JavaScript framework? I don't know, but their docs are amazing, and it's got a great user experience. So, if you build the best tool and nobody can learn it, is it the best tool? Yeah. Technical writers make that happen.
Right. I think Tom's session is about to start, and I know there's still, and I'm wondering if there are 13 people still watching, and I do want them to go to the other session. So
I'll go to the other session.
Thank you so much, everyone. I love these panels, and I love it. It's a topic that, it's technical, it's tech, but not technical. And I think it's so important, and particularly for like our career day. So yeah, I'm going to dip into the other session, but huge thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.